Okay, I guess we'll get this started. So I want to thank everybody for showing up to the following workshop. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome everybody to the University of Calgary if you're not from the Calgary region and attending here via online. Also, I'm going to begin with the land acknowledgement. So therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the traditional territories of the people of the Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta, which includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, comprising of the Siksika, Piikani, and Keene First Nations, as well as the Tsuut'ina First Nation and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. I would also like to thank the Calgary Institute of Humanities and Craig, the Classics, Religion, Anthropology, and Archaeology Interdisciplinary Group for sponsoring this workshop with our host, Marina Fisher, titled Connecting with the Outside World. So I'd like to introduce Marina Fisher. She's the collection specialist for numismatics at the Nickel Galleries, the University of Calgary. She holds an MA in ancient history with a specialization in art history from the University of Calgary, and her research focuses on ancient Greek and Roman coinage. She oversees a vast collection of 23,000 objects spanning from the beginning of coinage in the 7th century BCE to the modern period, including Greek, Roman, Byzantine, medieval, Islamic, and modern currencies. She's a recipient of the 2018 University of Calgary Teaching Award and lectures frequently in various departments across the campus. So that being said, we will start this workshop and let Marina take it away. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you all so much. I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I really wanted to share something interesting that you can really take away and learn from it. And I do want to give great thanks to the organizers of the conference, because I think this is an extremely important topic that we need to discuss. I have many years of teaching and dealing with with the outside world, the world outside of academia. I've been teaching continuing education for over 13 years. Since 2014, I've been working at the museum on campus and dealing with public, dealing with school children, dealing with all kinds of audiences that we get on campus and outside of campus. So this is what I've learned over all of these years, and that's what I want to share. Some key wisdom. Here it comes. I am going to divide this presentation into two parts. First, I'm going to tell you just a tiny little bit about you as a presenter. Little tips about that, and then I'm going to move on to the presentation itself. Some actual tips for how to present. There's a lot that's been coming out now about academics and the usual narrative that we hear about academics living in the ivory tower, and we are really experiencing now the consequence of that, because there's a great divide between the outside world and the academic world. And I do have to give credit to University of Calgary, because they have been really trying to push this agenda, to push the public engagement, public outreach, and it's been really good, especially when we get rewarded for these activities. So let's look at how do we fit into this, and how do we actually approach the public? Because a lot of time we are never thought about any of this. I learned by doing it, but I think there should definitely be a way that we can learn this from others who have already gone through their own experiences. So that's what I would like to do here. So let's see. I think this is usually what comes up very often, and this is already sort of old, but I think it is important to remind you that it is very crucial that you know what you do, and that you will get questions from general public and that you will have to say in really simple terms, what is it that you actually do? So it would have to be short and it would have to be clear. And I think it's also extremely important to practice that you already have this down so that you can really say it at 2 o'clock in the morning when somebody wakes you up, because it will happen to you. You will be stopped unexpectedly. You will be asked in moments when you're not prepared. But if you do practice and if you know that, you will be able then to at least come up with a version that will be acceptable to you. It is also extremely important that you love what you do and that you love doing your research, your studies, your area, the talks that you give. It's really important that you connect with the material. And here I just have one recent email that I have received from somebody who attended my talk at the Calgary Public Library, and it was so rewarding. And it is absolutely amazing to hear how people feel about your work, how they feel about your presentations, and a lot really comes out of that. In my case, I teach continuing education courses, and I often then asked about these courses, and then I essentially connect people to campus and campus programs, and they usually then, when they start to feel more comfortable about it, they come back and they fully get involved. So yes, getting involved with public is extremely, extremely important. And the best way to start is really with your local community. To look at your public libraries, that's a really common one. To look at the schools, to look at different centers, educational centers that you have, and even churches. I will tell you a little bit more about that, but this is almost like untapped resource for general public. So it is absolutely crucial that you network outside of academia and that you never underestimate general public. There are a lot of very, very smart people. Just because maybe they do not have higher degree, that doesn't mean they are not well read, or they don't have wide interests, they're not intelligent, or they are not able to think critically. And very often, I've been surprised by people I meet and the level of enthusiasm and passion that they have for what I do and what I talk about. This is just, I will include some images from some of my events. This was at the Spark Science Center here at Calgary. And some events are really nice and exciting. And this was an incredible event. There were over 300 people. And I took my collection with me and I was able to share it with the public. It was really, really exciting. And the comments as well that I got afterwards is really what drives me personally. But as I mentioned, not everything you do will be very glamorous. I've done many luncheons in churches for people over 25, sorry, not 25, 55, but it's more like in the 90s. And, you know, it's so fun when you see these people and they still have the drive and they still love to learn and they get excited about all of these things. I realized, especially in churches and crossover with what I do, is, and especially one of my interests is the connection between ancient coins and religion. And then I was able to take that topic across many different religious institutions in Calgary, different denominational churches, the Jewish synagogue, Islamic community, and so on. And it is really interesting, again, how important it is not to underestimate that audience. I have made some incredible connections, and some outcomes of these relationships were quite unexpected. When you connect with the general public, whether you're just chatting or whether you are giving a presentation, it is really important that you give impression and that you have an ability to talk a little bit about everything, because people do not understand and they really do not care, and they do not want to try to really understand exactly what is it, how the academic world works. When somebody ask you what do you do, and you say, oh, I work in classics and I study the ancient world, and they will ask you a question outside of your topic. And very often I have heard people say like, oh, that's not my area, and that kind of shuts down the conversation completely. And not only that, there was a lost opportunity, but it really left a wrong impression, because people are like, well, how can you spend all of these years without knowing this, without understanding like the general sense of the time. So I think it's really important to do have that understanding of ancient world, in this particular case, the ancient world in general. In my case, I work with with ancient artifacts. I work with ancient coins and money, and I've learned a little bit about everything. And I have also experienced in my presentations, questions come up about all kinds of stuff. And that has really inspired me to learn more and to answer these questions. Not perfectly, that is not the goal, but as long as you actually do acknowledge the question and you give some kind of answer, people are generally happy. When you start doing these talks and connecting with your community, you will start building your reputation. And the more you do it, the more people will hear about it. At the beginning, you may not have any audience. It has happened many times that I have been that I have been part of events that had like 2 people or 3 people. But if you do love what you do, it will not matter to you, because you will do exactly the same thing as if you were talking to an audience of 800. And that reputation will follow you, and people will start talking about your talks, your engagements, and so on. So yes, people will definitely Google you. In academia, I found over the years as well that many people look down on continuing education courses. Maybe that was more in the past. As I said, the University of Calgary has started really this campaign and this strategy about connecting with the community. And actually, unfortunately, the only reason I think this really happened is because we needed the funding. That was really the push, and money was the drive to connect with the community in the city. And it has really worked. People are enthusiastic about connecting with the university. But continuing education courses are excellent opportunity to learn how to present your material, to learn how to teach in general, and to learn how to connect with general public, because it is different. It is not worse, or it should definitely not be looked down upon, but it's just different. And in my particular case, I really find it very rewarding. As I said, I've been teaching over 13 years, and I teach probably sometimes up to 15 courses a year. Some are one-day courses. I have 4 to 6 one-day courses, just one day on Saturday for a few hours. I have like different evening courses. I have longer courses. I have shorter courses. And it has really been incredible. And once you start doing it and you commit to it, and you learn how to get better and better, people will start registering in your classes, and the word will spread, and you will have a lot of audience. Do not forget the kids. This is, again, something that happens a lot in academia. We often do not think about children, but children are extremely important to engage them early on, and not just for our own benefit, but for their benefit. They are very curious. They love to learn. And unfortunately, we do not have a lot of opportunities in Calgary in particular. So any type of event that you can stage, that you can be part of, is really rewarding for these future generations. I have been involved in many events with kids. Unfortunately, it's really hard to take photographs with children, with actually anybody, but children in particular. I have never really allowed to take pictures of children, and some you can take from the back, and they're never good photos. But anyway, I have been involved with many children. In this particular event that was at a public library in Crowfoot, there were over 50 children on the for this event, and I've done multiple events like these. I've also worked with children that come to museums. I've worked with kindergarten kids, and I worked with junior high, and all levels they come, and it is not easy. It does definitely not come easy to me either, but it's something that I have pushed myself to learn and to get better at, and I have definitely seen rewards from that. Connecting with the parents is another really interesting thing, because all of these kids come with parents, and I have had incredible conversations with parents and connections that I made from these events as well. So let's move on and really have some good tips about presentations, like the presentation itself. This is a statistic I just pulled off randomly from one of the articles that I read online about presentations. And maybe I wouldn't agree with 99%, but I have attended many presentations that were absolutely awful, just absolutely awful, both academic presentations and general public presentations. So let's stop that. Education is extremely important, and as I mentioned, we do not generally get that type of instruction. So it's time to change that. So let's start with the beginning. At the very beginning, obviously, start with thanking whoever invited you to that talk. That's really, really important, and it's just polite. So your opening statement should be strong, short, well prepared. You should certainly rehearse it. You should have it completely down. It should be very, very simple. But if you get that right, you will feel more confident, and you will then be able to continue with that confidence, and the audience will feel confident in you. Since we were talking about the beginning, I will mention the end as well. And the end is equally important, and we should acknowledge that. So the closing statement should also be very brief, very clear, and strong. So I have an example here. That's all you have to say. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for joining. Thank you very much for coming to this event. I've often heard people say, that's it, the end, I'm done. And it's really weird, and it leaves almost like a bad taste afterwards. It could be an excellent presentation, but if you end it badly, it will ruin that whole experience. So think about that as well. It has to be prepared. You have to think about it, because by the time you're done presenting, you may lose track of it. You may be focused on something completely different. But if you do know, and if you have it already in your mind, then it will be easy just to do it. So after your opening statement, you're going to introduce your talk. You're going to talk about your presentation. You're going to show your title slide. This is an example of a slide. It was a talk that I was invited to participate and to be part of it. And I was given the title. And at the moment I saw it, I never liked it. And I really have a strong dislike for titles that try to be funny or witty or anything like that. And I generally recommend to stay away from that. To be just very clear, very simple, and to the point of what you will be talking about. This is another one, and I will be talking more about how you should design these slides. The background in this case is absolutely obstructing the title. The title is also quite bad. But anyway, I just also want to show you some good examples and some bad examples. This is one of my slides that I've recently shown. And again, everybody will have different style. Everybody will have different preferences and ideas. And that is perfectly fine. I am just giving you something that I have come up with and that I have been consistent with over the years. Another one. So I usually like a big image, something that people can look at while they're waiting for the event to start. The title is really clear, really easy to read. You have your title, your location, where you're coming from. And I also like to include my email. This depends on the event. I also like to, especially if it's a class, I like to include my email right away. In other talks, I usually include it at the very end. When it comes to the organization of your presentation, it is very important that it's clear from the beginning to everyone in the room or wherever you're presenting what you will be talking about. If you provide that clear overview or outline of your talk, everybody will feel comfortable and they will know exactly where you are or where everybody is in the talk, and they can truly follow it. And there's a lot of stress that is removed from attending talks that people are not familiar with, especially the topics, when they know exactly what is happening, where they're going, how is this talk going to be developed. And that's exactly what you should be discussing in the beginning. You should tell everybody what is your plan and the big picture of your talk. So here is generally how the talks should be organized. So you have your title slide, you have your agenda slide, you have your section divider, you have your slides and section dividers and so on, and then you have your end slide. So that big picture that I mentioned is really important, because if you introduce your talk from the very beginning, just like that overview slide, people will feel very comfortable. They will understand what you're talking about. They will be able to follow. And in general, the experience will be much more positive. I have attended many talks where people start literally in the middle. And even though I was an expert in the field, I had no clue what the talk was about. And to me, this is absolutely unacceptable. We need to always be very clear about what we are talking about and what is going to be presented. Because if people cannot follow you, everybody's time is completely wasted. The reason why I included this photo of the planet is because I often think about this very first picture of the Earth that was taken in I think this was 1972. The full image of the planet that changed the complete understanding of our world and brought this idea of the big picture of our globe as a village, that we are all part of this big picture and big world. So anyway, I often think about this, and that's how I teach, that's how I talk, that's how I present. I always like to give that understanding of where do we start, how does this fit into the big world, and then you zoom in into the details. The slide style, or the style of your presentations, is really important, and you should certainly think about that. Here, obviously, I hope you all recognize it's a really bad example. The fonts are off, especially the background. The background is something you want to think about. You want to make sure that it's not obstructing or messing with your message. And generally stay away from any type of flowers or colors that do not necessarily need to be there. Another really bad example, think a little bit about the colors. Yellow on blue or black can be quite aggressive, can be hard for people to read. It can just not be the best experience. Another one, I come across these very often. I really do not understand what is about this ocean sky slide, but I see it a lot when I do my research online. So again, think about what is best for you. I'm not saying that you cannot include anything on your slide, that you cannot have a certain design, but think about it, because it really needs to fit into whatever you're doing, into who you are, and what your topic is about. I also see a lot of types of presentations like these. Stay away from color. Definitely not rainbows like these. That's never a good experience. But what is important is that you do find your own style. that you do find what is it that you like, what is it that you feel comfortable with, and stick with it. Make it your own, so that when people attend your presentations, they're already accustomed to your style, they already know what to expect, and that will only add to the overall experience. So I generally put my slides on white background. The contrast between black and white statistically has always been proven to have like a positive effect. Anyway, I am just doing this because it feels comfortable for me. This is how I connect with my material, and that's just what I've chosen for myself. I have seen some gorgeous presentations, and sometimes for a moment I thought of changing my personal style, but I always felt like that wasn't me. And then deciding to do what was comfortable for me and who I was as a presenter was really important to me to define that. Images. Obviously, images, every presentation should have images. I know it can be hard with many topics. In this particular case, for me, I do a lot of images. I deal with art history, which is really easy to present, but I have attended some talks that had really nothing to do with art, but they were beautifully done. And they included some images that were relevant to the talks, to the topic, and the audience had something to look at, because they usually like to look at something when there is a screen. And even the talks that did not necessarily even need any image, the experience was generally positive. So images are obviously very powerful. We have all heard about that. There are all the research that shows that they help with memory and learning. I think if you talk about something and you show the text on the slide, there's up to 10% recollection. But if you show an image, there is about 65% of recollection. So that's quite a significant difference. Also, use images that help you make your point. So give some thought to it. And especially choose high quality images. In this day and age, putting anything that is not high quality, high res is just not acceptable. So finding images online, there's a lot that is free domain, copyright free, that can be used. Use that, or find a way how to get your images. At the University of Calgary, we have certain databases as well that can be used. So if you do need any tips, feel free to contact me or talk to your librarian. So this is how I often like to do my talks on coins. I love to find these super beautiful images of coins and blow them up and really immerse the audience into this experience. If you're talking about any objects that do not necessarily are common, or people do not connect with it, they do not have experience with these objects, it is very helpful to show some kind of relation to scale. So in this particular case, again, I have a coin that is held with the fingers, but I've dealt with vases and different objects as well. So it really kind of helps. If you do not have an image like that, I think it's really important that you actually show physically, but with your hands, give some dimensions, and people definitely love that and feel more comfortable with that and connected with that. If you have, again, any images or any details, blow them up, connect them, give some kind of thought into how you want to present your visual material and how you want to use that visual material to its fullest. If there are any references to locations, any maps, or anything that you're talking about geographically, it is quite beneficial to include that information in your presentation. Either explain it or visually include the location, like different maps, like I have one in this slide in particular. But I find that it's really just respectful, not expecting people to know exactly everything you're talking about. And then again, it just allows audience to connect more with it. This is another image of one of like my presentations, and you can see the images dominate my presentations. Again, as I mentioned, I do have some advantage because I do teach with a lot of images and art, but I have seen incredible presentations that were done beautifully with images that did not necessarily have image as a focus of the talk. I also seen, these are just some things I found online, and I included some examples. Again, a blurry image is just unacceptable. Sometimes when we copy an image into the slide, it may look good when we are working on it on our small laptop and so on, but always blow it up. Always go through your presentation at the very end, blow it up on your screen, go slide by slide, check everything, because you will be surprised what you will find when you blow it up on a bigger screen. Please don't do anything like this. The stacking of images, overloading of images is just not effective at all. It actually has the opposite effect. And I often find something like this. Please don't do that. This is just awful. It is confusing. It creates layering of your information. It just does not really, our brain just does not process it the way it should. When it comes to text, obviously, we've all been told, do not just make slides with text only. This is really hard to read, especially depending on the font you choose, depending on the spacing you create between the paragraphs, between the sentences, and so on. So as much as possible, avoid something like this. And even if you do have to have slides full of text, organize the text that is easy to understand, divide it in different sections and so on. Just one of the examples, something I pulled from my own personal stuff, a slide where I really needed to include a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure that it's not completely boring and overwhelming. So I'd like to include different images, especially if they're relevant, then I would include them in the slide. Even if they're not particularly relevant, I try to find something that would work with that particular topic. Here is a slide that I have included quite a lot of text that I needed to share. But again, I always make sure that I have some beautiful images that can also be a focus of the audience when they're looking at the screen, when they're looking at the slide. And but it can be done in many, many different ways. You can divide a text, you can put it on the other side, you can separate the sentences, and there are many different options. The fonts. The fonts are quite important for various reasons. Well, first of all, it may not show the way you want it. It may be hard to read. People are not used to it. Also, especially if you're presenting in like a live event, which we will be again in the future, it can happen that when you open your presentation with a different font, your font will not work. And I've seen that happen. It's devastating when you have everything prepared and you work so hard on it, and then you open it on someone else's computer and everything just goes completely crazy and it looks just awful. And there's no time to fix it. So be mindful of that, and just be mindful of the script in general. So it needs to be clear, a single font across the presentation. You can use a different font for titles or subtitles if you want to emphasize that. That's perfectly clear, but be consistent across your presentation. Again, large text, keep in mind what is your audience, keep in mind the size of the screen and so on. And here are just, again, some examples of what to do and what not to do. Color is, it is tempting to do emphasis with caps. That's generally not recommended unless you have a particular word you really want to emphasize. So definitely not something you want to use across the presentation. And the color can be used sporadically if you really want to emphasize a particular word, but it can be done differently. You can put it in bold, you can italize it, and so on. But anything like this, it's really hard to read, and it, at the end of the day, looks very unprofessional. Do not read your slides. Even if you have, especially in the talks that do not have the visual aids, it can be very dry, very, very, very boring. And even when you have slides and then you just read the slides, again, you lose the audience. They completely disengage immediately. So I find it really useful to have certain information on the slide to give you clues and cues, what you need to say, how you need to organize your talk, what is the flow you need to follow. But in general, you need to be prepared that you actually know your topic, you know what you're talking about, you know the flow of your slides, that you can transition from one slide to another, from one topic to another. So it is important that you have all of that and that you do not read your slide. I'm including this one again because I wanted to show in cases when you do have lots of text on screen that you can emphasize some words that can guide you through your text, that can give you clues, and then you can emphasize them, and you can just do exactly what you plan to do, but you don't get lost. Your eye immediately goes through to these words, and you can just continue to present seamlessly. Your language. We've heard that as well many, many times. Do not use any acronyms. Do not use any words that general public would not understand. Do not use any specialized terms, any complicated words or anything like that. It alienates the audience immediately. It gives a wrong impression, that it gives the feeling of superiority of the speaker. And that's definitely not the goal. When you do have quotes in your slides, do read them. Read them loud and clear so that everybody can see and follow together with you on the slide. I have often attended presentations where there would be a giant quote on the slide and the speaker would not really address this quote, would not really particularly explain it, would not really go over the quote with the audience. It would just be there. Hanging, and in the air, and then you go to the next slide and everybody's completely confused. And even when you do discuss the quote, it is important that you do read the slide with the audience, like loudly, clearly, slowly, and then everybody is in this together. The pointers. The pointers, both in live presentations and in online presentations or virtual talks, it's important to think about how that's used. If you have a laser pointer for the screen, make sure that you take your time to show where your pointer is. If you have the red laser or anything like that, don't go like crazy on the screen like this and everybody's like lost completely. They have no idea where you're pointing and everybody's over before anybody even figured out what you were pointing at. So make sure you take your time, you stay in one spot so that nobody gets dizzy. You make sure that everybody's looking with you. The same with presentations on the screen. So when you're pointing, so you see, for example, I have my pointer here and I'm go like, oh, like this, and everybody's like, what just happened? So go do it slowly so that everybody catches up with you, that they see exactly where you are on the screen, and then they can follow. The time. It's really important that you understand the length of the time that is given to you, that you organize your slides accordingly. Do not go over your time, even if you have to cut your presentation short. I mean, obviously, if you go a few minutes or so, that's fine, but do not go over 15, 20 minutes. I have, again, attended presentations by highly regarded scholars that had gone over for 45 minutes. It was exhausting. So the talk was almost 2 hours long and it was supposed to be 45 minutes. So do not do that. In general, look at what you have on your slide, approximately 1 minute per slide. Depends what you have on it, but that's sort of like a gauge. You can use that. Practice, as I mentioned, is extremely important. Look at your slides, go over all of your slides in detail. Especially make sure it's the best if you can prepare your presentation a few days prior to your talk so that you familiarize yourself with it, that you have time to kind of like process all of it. Go through all of your slides on the big screen, the way you see it, the way the audience will be seeing it. Make sure that it works that way. Make sure that whatever you included in your presentation works properly. If you decide to include any links or any videos or anything like that, always make sure you test them prior to the talk on your own computer. And especially if you're doing it somewhere else, the chances of things going wrong are really high. So always before the talk, make sure that your links work. And if you can already upload it and put it on the desktop or anything like that, make sure you do that. It takes time and lots of experience, lots of opportunities to give public talks. And every time you do it, you're just going to get better and better and better at it. The beginning is hard. It takes a lot of stress, nerves, work that goes into it. But the more you do it, the better you will get. So essentially, don't stress too much about it. Just do your best. Do the best you can do, and do your best for any situation. I have also attended talks where great experts really did terribly. And you can see that they were not prepared. You can see they didn't give it enough time. You can see that it wasn't a priority on their list. And it is really disrespectful and offending to whoever your audience is. So do your best, whether you have 2 people in the room, whether that is a room full of elderly who do not even particularly care about what you're talking about because they're getting a free lunch. It does not matter. Do your best. It will pay off for sure. So that's what I prepared for today. Here, this is my closing slide. I usually include my thank you. I include my email, any relevant information that would be useful for this particular situation. In this case, I have included my Twitter handle. And so in case you're interested, you can check me out. But it's perfect because I wanted to include time for any questions, any comments, or anything like that that any of you may have.